Welcome aboard to the Captain Crypto Show. Today, we join the Captain's Council to discuss the latest developments in the world of cryptocurrency. Here's your host, Kylan Hurt.
All right, you scurvy dogs, welcome back to the Captain Crypto Show. Tonight is November 22nd, 2017, which means we're going to be doing a full Thanksgiving episode on cryptocurrency. Okay, maybe not, because Thanksgiving doesn't really have much to do with cryptocurrency, and that's not why you tuned in anyway. So without further ado, me and Jacob are going to dive right into it, and we're going to start off with our first story, which does have quite a bit to do with the ecospace, the cryptocurrency space in general, but especially to our San Diego region, because last week we had Caleb from Salt Lending here. So for those of you who are not familiar with Salt Lending, they are obviously a lending platform. They have an ICO token out there, but he came and presented at our local meetup, and I thought he did a pretty good job. So Jacob, you were also there at the meetup. What did you think of Caleb's presentation? What did you think of Salt Lending maybe going into the meetup, to the presentation, and how'd you leave that event?
Well, it was super nice to hear. I've been reading a lot about Salt, and I've been super interested in actually not Salt in particular, but in basically the product that they're offering. I've been waiting for a product like that for a long time. So they're really, I think they're really going to be providing something that has been needed. But it's been really nice to hear it firsthand. I know their Telegram chat and some of their things. I mean, he was restricting what he was able to say, but but I still felt like it was a little more better understood and I feel like I got more information, a lot more information that I was definitely missing.
Right. Instead of getting your normal, tweets, right, or announcements that have been carefully put together, you actually got someone who gave a little bit more of a conversation. Obviously, there was a presentation, but he took a lot of questions, and there were a lot of hard-hitting questions. Mm-hmm. And in general, like you said, there were some areas where he was not able to maybe give the full answer that he would like to, and some of that's understandable. We'll cover that in a moment. But as a whole, I thought when it came to kind of connecting with the audience, he did a pretty good job. And he also did an excellent job of explaining exactly what Salt Lending does, because when I first heard about Salt, I really didn't quite understand what it was or how it would work. The whole idea of lending out, at first I thought they were lending out cryptocurrency, but it sounds like it's the opposite, where they are letting you essentially leverage your cryptocurrency in order to get loans out of something like cash, fiat, right? And this is something, from what I've gathered, Jacob, it sounds like you are more or less unbanked, or these sorts of things tend to strike a bit more of a chord with you than maybe some people who use a lot of traditional banking systems. So can you give the listeners an idea of kind of what your experience has been with the traditional banking system, and I guess perhaps why you don't use them as much as a normal person or as your typical person would, and where Salt would come in that part of your life. You don't have to go into too much detail.
Yeah. Well, I mean, on the traditional banking system side, maybe I'm a little unique, but I've done everything right. On my 18th, that I can think of, right? On my 18th birthday, I went to a bank to get a secured credit card. I had my little deposit money, I deposited it, and I got a secured credit card, started building my credit right away from day one. And I've had, it's ever since then, I've had a good credit score, after starting about a year after that. But I've still it's just been such a pain going through the traditional system for getting credit. And it doesn't have to be that way. It's sort of just the fact that things are the risk models are really the core drivers of the business. They're not really focusing on a nice user experience, and I don't know if Salt necessarily is or if a financial institution would, but the fact that it's using crypto just automatically takes away a lot of that friction. And so, I've never used Salt Lending, but I've been a huge user of platforms like BTC Jam. I know that went bust, and and stuff like that. But I've been a huge proponent and user of a bunch of other credit options, and been super interested in always researching all that.
So yeah, since you've done quite a bit of research, I guess it makes sense for you to. Why don't you give kind of the listeners out there who maybe don't know much about Salt just a basic, 1-minute spiel on kind of what service they offer?
They are a collateralized. So it's sort of a leveraging platform in a sense, but you actually get cash. So you can think of it very simply as a home equity loan for your Bitcoin. So they will hold the actual ownership of the token and provide you a portion of that value in cash and charge you an interest rate on top of that.
Right, and yeah, they use some multi-sig wallets in order to make sure that that no one's kind of running off with the funds, that everything gets done kind of. Yeah,
it's not completely open source, and there's some reasons for that apparently, and I can't go too much into detail with that, but yeah, they're using some sort of signature architecture to secure the funds properly.
And it definitely seems like they are targeting the sorts of people who, for whatever reason, cannot get a loan with a normal fiat system. So the example that he gave was something like, okay, let's say John wants $10,000 worth of cash, and he has $20,000 worth of crypto, but for whatever reason, he either doesn't want to he either doesn't want to cash out the crypto, or he just plain can't for whatever reason. So he goes to someone like Salt Lending. He deposits the $20,000 worth of cryptocurrency, and in return, he'd get something like, I don't know, let's say anywhere between $10,000 to, I don't know, $16,000, $17,000. That is money that he can kind of do what he wants with. And like you said, since Salt has that cryptocurrency, they are able to, if anything, how do I say it? They have quite a bit of leverage. So if just in case anything goes wrong, there's enough collateral that Salt is able to protect themselves, while at the same time the user is able to get a sort of loan that they wouldn't have been able to otherwise get.
And at much lower interest rates, right? Because this loan, as long as Salt's underlying mechanism of margin calling it at the right time works, it should be a very, very secure bet for investors. And they're not actually betting on the price. I once made the mistake of thinking that the lenders or the people loaning the money on the platform were betting against the price of Bitcoin, but that's actually doesn't seem to be true. They are independent of the Bitcoin price. They're just using it as a security means. So they get their money whether the Bitcoin price goes up or down.
Yeah, and that was one of the big questions I had was, okay, well, once this cryptocurrency starts fluctuating one way or another, then what happens? And Caleb had a pretty good answer. All of them sounded pretty agreeable for whatever the situation was. So they made it did sound like they have done a good job of thinking through the different situations. And like you said, trying to make sure that it's a decent user experience for whoever's trying to take out the loan, but at the same time also protecting themselves as a company because there are risks involved with lending out money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we'll see a lot of businesses being from all this new capital, from all these crypto, new crypto, I guess, millionaires or rich people. I think they'll start innovating with this extra capital that they're able to actually use without selling their crypto assets.
Yeah, and one of the big things that I found interesting about this talk was that they have a token, right, an ERC20 token, and it's one of those tokens that a lot of people have asked about. Oh, well, should I buy it? It sounds like there could be a lot of use cases. And
I know you were a bit skeptical of that.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one reason why I was happy that I had a talk with you kind of earlier, because you are more familiar with this. But essentially beforehand, I was just kind of asking myself, well, what does this token even represent? If it's not equity, if it's not profit sharing or revenue sharing, what does it represent? And to be fair, Caleb was not able to, how would I say, there are some use cases, some actual concrete use cases, right? They're related to how much value you can redeem them for on the Salt platform. Is that correct?
And it's only to a certain, so you buy memberships and then you pay a portion of your interest. And right now I think it's only a fifth of that, which, I don't know, it's sort of a weird usage for it.
A little convoluted, or?
It's sort of just not logical. I think they're just sort of trying to find a use case for it, which it's
at least they're trying. It seems like a lot of other tokens they're not even trying, right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean that's sort of true with the whole ICO space. And I'm not really sure if the the tokens necessary or useful in a use case situation. It might not actually add anything to the platform. It might actually make it a little unintuitive. But if it acts as a thing to allow them to raise capital in a way which they wouldn't be able to, they wouldn't be able to with the traditional system of they wouldn't be able to go to an IPO. They wouldn't be able to sell public shares in the same way, anyways, not on an international level, and not with the same friction, and not without the same level of friction as they would with without crypto. So I think just them being able to get the capital might allow them to make a better product that ultimately ends up totally defeating the downsides of having an ICO.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, one of the big reasons is that they want to raise money, and definitely a lot of these projects that are being started, even if some of them go bust anyway, a lot of them, probably even more, would go bust if they did not have any sort of money that they were able to raise through their ICO. So obviously a lot of my friends, maybe they're not the same as your group of friends, but I have a feeling they're probably not going to be using, actually, take it back, maybe I'm not sure. I have doubts about how much they would be using a service like Salt. So when they look at the token, they're not thinking, oh, I can redeem this to pay off interest or whatever at some further point. They're more looking at it from a speculation standpoint. And for a while, I thought that was kind of the only that was the only thing that people were looking at, which was weird because, if it's only speculation, then what? If there's no promises behind it, then what good does that do? But like you said, it sounds like those tokens can be used. It's a little hard to figure out how the way that the system works, but they can be used to redeem, like you said, kind of redeem credit within the system.
Ultimately, it's based on trust. It's based on the trust of the company. And so I think as we've seen with another ICO recently that didn't do that well, or that ended up being a total fraud. It can be quite problematic, and especially in this Wild West. What I'm hoping to see in the sort of near-term future is sort of a market-based or a decentralized sort of regulatory body. So right now we have the SEC in the United States. I don't know what it is in Europe. I forget the name. But you have one option for regulation, and I think the regulation provided definitely protects investors and probably. It's a very useful thing to have. The Wild West can be dangerous, and when you want to deal with large amounts of money, as we are with ICOs, I think it's good to have some oversight. And I think even the companies and the consumers will both applaud it and want it, and they'll choose to opt in to these regulations, in a voluntary sense. So I think that if we can have sort of like a company. Be in charge of oversight and regulation with these ICOs, then I think we'll be able to see a lot more, not only investor confidence, we'll see a huge reduction in fraud.
Right, and I think you would see some clarity, at least on the business side. It sounds like at Salt, I'm not putting words in their mouth, but it sounds like they would love to be able to say, oh yeah, these tokens represent this portion of profits or revenue, but because that would open them up to SEC regulations, they are holding off on that. So hopefully it would be nice if eventually this has some sort of happy ending where they end up profitable. And hey, guess what? You own Salt tokens. Now you get a portion of the profits. Now something like that would probably be years off, but you hope that that's eventually what happens. And I don't know what's actually going on behind the scenes, but you could tell that Caleb as a presenter it was like he had a muzzle on, he wanted to be able to give people that reassurance, but legally they just can't at this point.
Which is super weird why they're it's like almost a prohibiting, freedom of speech in a sense, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap there. I would somewhat agree with that. So I think that's enough on Salt. Like I said earlier, when you came in versus when you left, do you have more confidence when you left that event? More confidence in Salt than when you came in, or
confidence? I'm not sure. I
confidence of their business model or of their token.
I mean, I think I understand it better. I'm not sure if I can say I'm more confident. I'm more excited about it. I still just want to see the product launch. I want to see their execution. That's what I want to see to be able to say I'm confident.
Right, and see what the actual interest rates are too. See where it's actually usable.
Yeah, I know they only have accredited investors and stuff like that. So I want to see the results.
All right, so for those of you out there who have not looked into Salt, definitely check them out. I think they are one of the more interesting ICOs that have occurred, and it'll be definitely interesting to see how their application develops and whether people find it useful. So I think that's enough on Salt. So we're heading from one ICO to another. I believe this week we found out that a specific ICO by the name of Confido, it looks like some of the investors of that ICO token may have ended up empty-handed. Jacob, do you have a rough idea of what occurred with this story?
Yeah, Confido, from what I understand, was trying to sort of do what Bitrated already does. It was Bitrated is a platform. It's that allows multi-signature arbitration. It offers a arbitration marketplace where you can pick an arbitrator and you can see their reviews, ratings, and it's connected to all their online databases. I've actually used Bitrated quite a few times.
So it sounds like a little bit of a reputation system involved along with some arbitration.
And that's the way you can pick one, right? And then so the best arbitrators also get to set their own fees, so they actually produce income, and it can actually be
That's
profitable.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, so it pays them for their time of going through these contracts but the beautiful part, so the distinction between like an actual escrow agent, like with traditional real estate or with something like local Bitcoins that actually does full on escrow, is that with arbitration, the third party doesn't have complete control over the funds. They can't run and steal the funds.
Right.
You don't have to trust them completely. You just need to hope, or you just need one of the other two parties to be honest for the contract to execute honestly.
And that's the beautiful thing about multi-sig is you can kind of prevent one lone bad actor from running off with the money. But for whatever reason, it seems like they didn't have multi-sig involved with this ICO. And the founder, whose name is supposedly Joost van Doorn, which sounds a little bit like Victor Von Doom to me. You know what I mean? I think the red flags may have been there. Sounds like he's run off. I think they posted some sort of cryptic message about some sort of legal issues. Then they took down their website. But so there's obviously the question of, okay, are there really legal issues, or is the legal issue that you want to run off with the money?
Well, I mean, a lot of companies have had legal issues. Bitfinex, I think Tether has had legal issues. But they keep communication open at all times. So it just doesn't seem like that. They might say that just so that some people might not go after them.
Right, at least to buy them some time to run off. And you do have to wonder, it was how much do we even know about these people? I know in one of my podcasts I talk about how to figure out how to decide which cryptocurrencies to buy, and I think that either number one or number two was like, okay, who's behind it? Like, who's the actual team, right? Because if you can, just looking at this Joost van Doorn guy, I look up. There's not much information on him. That's a red flag by itself.
The thing is, too, that you can't really... I mean, if you just know their name and stuff, you have to... It's sort of hard to do in-depth research on some guy across the globe that you haven't met before, right? And, they can put things out there and stuff, but most people just aren't going to have the patience to really put that in the time. That's sort of a due diligence thing. One thing that caught my attention was that apparently... Confido was an ICO that was most of the money was raised through a platform. It wasn't done directly like it would with Salt, where you buy at least tokens initially on their platform directly. They're using a platform that's apparently called Token Lot. That it's sort of I guess you could say like crowd or like GoFundMe, but for investing with ICOs specifically. But what I'm wondering is Token Lot like. They don't have any. They might not have. I don't know if they did any due diligence for that. And
that's a good question. Is if they're the platform, what do they have any responsibility? If so, what responsibility do they have to their users or investors to do some research of their own into who's trying to get money out of their users, right?
Yeah, I mean, even if they don't have responsibility, they darn right should. I mean, otherwise, why use them? They could just go direct.
Yeah, if you're representative at Token Lot, you want to hit up Captain Crypto HD on Twitter. I'm willing to listen, but it sounds like this was kind of a situation where there's not too many winners. Maybe there's one winner and then a bunch of losers. Luckily, it sounds like it was only $300,000 or so lost. Yeah, I know. Welcome to the ICO space. If it's not 300 million, it's not even a blip on the radar.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully none of you out there were holding Confido ICO tokens, because if you were, it sounds like you're not getting anything in return.
Yeah, and the thing is, it sounded like a good idea. Confido, even now, I mean, just on paper, it seems interesting to try to do what Bitrate is doing in a decentralized way. I mean, that's sort of what OpenBazaar and a few other projects sort of have this sort of general idea of arbitration or escrow that is really needed in crypto. And ironically, in this ICO, we probably could have used something like that.
That's kind of what I was thinking. Is like, where was Confido, confidence, more like a confidence man. Yeah, so it's unfortunate, but it is a healthy reminder that this is cryptocurrency. Things get a little wild. So I think that's enough on that story. All right, so one of the biggest stories, or maybe even the biggest story of the week, was that the US dollar Tether kind of token that is used on some of the exchanges, it sounds like there was a hack. It sounds like $30 million worth of this Tether has gone missing. I believe that they have decided to try to do some sort of fork to reverse that transaction. And it sounds like a lot of the exchanges are involved. And additionally, as a kind of side note, it sounds like, who was it? The hacker, one of the earlier people were saying that they're suspicious that the person who did this hack may have been linked to earlier hacks. Did you read that as well?
I didn't read that part, no.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember which earlier hack it was. I don't know if it's the Bitfinex hack or anyways. Sounds like this person is a hacker that definitely knows what they're doing. But so there's so many questions here for me, because I had heard about a Tether token, but I have used the US dollar Tether token within an exchange, but I always assumed it just meant that it was like the exchange had kind of like credit, so I didn't realize.
On some exchanges, I think it works that way. Some close partners to Bitfinex, but on other exchanges, you actually see it has a different price than like $1 Tether isn't equal to exactly $1 in the exchange.
Okay, so might depend upon on the exchange, but definitely having that functionality of being able to quote unquote cash out into something that kind of represents cash, at least maybe in a roundabout way, that was definitely very very useful for traders, especially when they had to kind of cash out and then buy back in and try to time things. So it was definitely very convenient to have that,
especially between exchanges.
Yeah. So that was another question. So with this, so it sounds like between certain exchanges, they could send this US dollar Tether between one Tether wallet on an exchange and another Tether wallet on an exchange.
Right.
Okay. So yeah, that's pretty interesting. So essentially, it was a lot like any other currency. It sounds like, just somehow they tether it to one US dollar.
Right. And the idea of Tether wasn't just fiat currencies, although that's pretty much all it's used for, and that's as far as they've gone with it. The idea
stablecoin.
It is the general idea of Tether is to tether just generally real world assets or just traditional financial instruments that have to be held by a central authority, or that pretty much should be, and sort of linking that to the crypto world. So you have the quick moving of this crypto thing. You're always trusting the central entity behind it, but you get basically all the advantages of crypto except for trust and decentralization. But you get the fast, cheap transactions. You get the irreversibility. You get a degree of privacy, at least outside of the central authority. So people can't spy on you outside of that. But you would be able to tether. The idea is you'd be able to tether things like stocks or gold or silver or even things more arbitrary than that.
And was that what you would be able to do, tether to different things with that same Tether?
So you'd have a
platform or token, or one for each?
Yeah, I mean that's sort of how they pitched it. And they did have plans. I think it's probably still on their website of doing more than just dollars, and I think they have a few like other major fiat currencies.
So do you have any idea what the underlying mechanism is for that? Like, how do you keep something pegged to the dollar? Like,
it's the same way. It's not really pegged. It's sort of it's not a pegging system. It's a banking system. It's a system where they just hold an equivalent amount of X asset in their security vaults.
Okay. So hypothetically, they had at least $30 million in their reserves of actual dollars.
The whole market cap, I think, right before this was about 600 million.
Okay, so it did represent. That's interesting. So it's like you got this Tether, this U.S. dollar thing that's kind of on the blockchain. It's kind of that's a pretty interesting concept. But it sounds like in this case, maybe their security was not up to par because $30 million goes missing, which for an exchange, I would have to think that's pretty sizable amount of money.
Yeah, I've used Tether a little bit before here and there, and their execution's really been a joke. It's sort of I don't even know why they are progressing so slowly.
Yeah, so I'm kind of curious then, if you don't have to go into too much detail, but what kind of crypto to crypto exchange do you usually use? Like when you're trading, whether it's day trading or what have you?
I've used every major exchange in the top 10% of volume. I've used every single exchange. I can tell you which one I like.
Which one do you like? Maybe which ones you don't like as well.
So especially recently, I've stuck to mostly U.S. based ones. And the thing is, a lot of them have had great periods of time. Like Bitfinex used to be awesome. It really did used to be awesome, and I used to use it all the time, almost exclusively for a long period of time. It depends what you're doing, right? So a lot of exchanges just don't support a lot of altcoins. Like even Bitfinex supports quite a few altcoins, but they don't support all of them. So you can't pick it it depends on what you're doing, right? You can't always and some like different with margin. They have different options, right? So depending on what you're doing, there's an exchange for you, but generally a lot of them have been like Bitfinex has lost me money because they've had problems. Kraken has been really, really bad, not just with support, just with orders. I know tons of people having like really major issues. They have to put a buy order, simple market buy order in 20 times. I'm calling you out, Kraken. They have to put a buy order in 20 times, and they're a huge. I think they're a San Francisco-based exchange startup. There's no reason. Like, come on, guys.
Yeah, I think, like you said, there are a lot of different factors that go into which cryptocurrency exchange you're using. Obviously,
but that's also not exclusive to Kraken. Like Coinbase is also like people hate. Really, we're having. I mean, I get it because you're trying to build the next New York Stock Exchange,
right?
For Bitcoin and because of this demand and stuff, and they didn't really plan for it. I don't know. I feel like there should just be like an open source engine or something that they can just plug in and then get the basics right so that they can get the website working. I mean, because this is just, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm naive, but I feel like it's rookie stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned before, it is kind of interesting that so many exchanges have come and gone. They've rose and they fall, and sometimes they don't survive that fall. Other times they survive kind of in a lesser form. And we've been through so many of them. Talking
about lesser forms, Bitfinex's form is the current form with Tether and I think their Bitfinex tokens that they had and their weird history. It's very reminiscent of Mt. Gox to a lot of users, and that scares a lot of people.
Yeah, and that's just with Bitfinex. I think BTCE, there were some news stories earlier in the year that maybe they were somewhat involved in the hacking of Mt. Gox.
Right.
So definitely you end up with all sorts of weird backstories. And so to the listeners out there, I hammer it home, and I'll continue to hammer it home. Don't keep your money on an exchange if you don't have to. Yeah, just in general, just don't. At some point, you will lose that money. It's just a matter of time. It's happened so many times before, and it'll happen again. So in this case,
and you can do that very easily with Bitcoin. When you have dollars on an exchange, I mean, you'd have to either convert into Bitcoin and then take some price volatility risk, or withdraw to your bank. And withdrawing it to your bank, that's more of a pain. So whenever you have Bitcoin, unless you're about to use it or you're really going to use it very soon, there's really no reason to have it. You should just take it off. The transaction fee is worth it.
Yeah, the exchange, I definitely don't leave much on the exchange. I know some people are like, oh yeah, I want to do, some sort of, I want to short this or futures that or leverage this. And it's like, okay, you're going to keep it on there for that long at one time. I think that's just completely nuts. Okay, so I think that's enough about that hack. It was definitely a big story, and every so often we get a hack, and I'm sure within the next few weeks we'll hear about another one, right? Half the stories on here about a hack of someone losing a bunch of money.
Mm-hmm.
For those of ye out there enjoying the show, your captain would love to get some feedback on how best to improve it. You can find me on Twitter as Captain Crypto HD, and on most of the high seas of social media as either Captain Crypto or Captain Crypto Show. Just be on the lookout for my logo. Also, be aware that due to the technical aspects of each platform, that my podcast feed will always have the most up-to-date and latest revisions of each episode. So, if you're enjoying this episode, feel free to give your old captain a review on iTunes and share this episode with the rest of your crew. Now, back to the show.
All right, Jacob, I'm not sure what your plans are for Thanksgiving, but I think a lot of our listeners out there are preparing themselves for what can sometimes be an agonizing Thanksgiving dinner meal conversation, but other times can be actually a lot of fun. You know, a lot of times you're there with your loved ones talking about, you know, what they might be old stories from your childhood. But I know if you guys are listeners here and you, because you're probably interested in cryptocurrency, at some point you're going to start talking about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. So I think a lot of listeners out there kind of wondering, what is the appropriate way to bring this topic up? Jacob, what kind of advice could you give to people who maybe are preparing themselves for today or tomorrow going to have dinner with their family, and how do they even bring up the topic of cryptocurrency, maybe to someone who either doesn't know much about it or hasn't heard of cryptocurrency at all?
Well, I think the way that most people try to introduce Bitcoin is from a financial or investment aspect. And I think that's the wrong way. I know that gets people really excited, and even people who just don't understand it, when they see money and they see price and they see big numbers, they get all happy and giddy, and then they want to buy and invest, and it becomes a get-rich quick scheme. And I think that's the wrong perspective and the wrong message to really put out there. That's not what Bitcoin is. It's not a get-rich quick scheme. It's an amazing.
You can get rich.
You can get rich, but you can get rich with just about anything if you get lucky, right? So the thing is, the really important thing that is exciting about Bitcoin, even if the price is 1 cent today. What's exciting about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency? It's the technology, and it's the use cases and the applications that are being presented by this new technology. And that's, I think, if you're going to talk about Bitcoin, you really want to show your enthusiasm without, being a salesman and potentially destroying your relationships with family members. It's important to focus on the technology and have discussions about that. You can talk about your interests without going off into what people are more defensive about. People are more defensive about the financials of Bitcoin because it's sort of, I don't want to say almost emotional. But when you talk about just the technology, people are much, much more open-minded about that. They will not necessarily grasp the technology because some of it's a little hard to understand. But when you just talk about use cases, people are like, yeah, that makes sense. I can see this technology. I can see the use cases and how it could affect me in a positive way.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where you don't want to be that guy that's always talking about Bitcoin, or there is a proper place for it. I think everyone likes to talk about finances, and prices do come up. And one thing that I really have to make sure people pay attention to is be aware that if you're the person in the family that's gotten into cryptocurrency and you've made a lot of money, or maybe you think you're going to make a lot of money, how would I say this? Don't brag about it. I think that's the simplest way to put it. And don't try not to make other people feel like they're missing out on something. Right. Maybe they are missing out on something, but just remember, you get more bees with honey than you do with vinegar, I guess is the simplest way to put it. But yeah, as you said, when it comes to Bitcoin, aside from the finances, when I think about what I like about cryptocurrency, ultimately it's that it gives people more control over their own finances. So it is empowering. So I think one of the things you can do is you can just bring up kind of a situation where maybe they've been screwed over either by the banking system, or or maybe they've been scammed. And if you think there's an application or a use case where cryptocurrency would have helped them, then you can make those situations more relatable. You can make them even more applicable to maybe your family members' lives, because you probably know your family members intimately, and everyone's been scammed at some point. So definitely seeing ways that it can help them avoid risks or help empower them is probably I would think one of the more useful tactics to kind of help spread the word, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking about how exactly about how to approach them properly, because.
So have you not approached your family members yet?
Oh no, yeah, I've definitely approached them. They know all.
You're gonna
all
try
too
it
much
again
about
this
Bitcoin.
year.
I've never tried to sell them Bitcoin, right? I always just try to. You can even, and there's a bunch of fun things in Bitcoin, right? And
Like
that,
literally sell them Bitcoin or sell them on the idea of Bitcoin? Because I never know with you.
yeah, both. I'm not. I'm just. I like to talk with people, even if they have a different opinion. At the end of the day, I still enjoy having the conversation and just having that back and forth. And I think it's good to have outside perspectives. They're probably more important than the perspectives that agree with me.
Right. So do you have a lot of family members and friends that are already involved with cryptocurrency at all? Or is it something where they have not taken the plunge yet, or they already have, or just slightly?
So I think the ones who understand it the most from my family side has been less involved. And the ones who understand least have been the most involved, ironically, which is
Alarming.
yeah, it definitely is. And I think that's sort of a general sentiment. I think the majority of people investing in Bitcoin, throwing all their money in Bitcoin, are also the same people throwing all their money into BitConnect. Not in large amounts, but in terms of quantities of people.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of people being onboarded right now. I will say one thing that I have, kind of like what you mentioned earlier, is in general, you don't really have to be too pushy toward people. In fact, when you're pushy, you tend to naturally push them away. A lot of people will be attracted by the price. And the one thing I've done, and obviously I'm a podcaster now, and I work at a cryptocurrency company, is I've just been there and let everyone know that I'm there to answer questions. That even includes you guys, the listeners, man. My contact info is out there. I like talking with people. I like answering questions. I like helping people. So instead of me trying to push someone into doing something that maybe they don't want to do, or maybe they do want to do, but maybe they recoil when you start to get a little pushy, I've more or less just kind of let them know that my hand is extended, to speak metaphorically. And a lot of people, when the time comes, when they're ready, they'll take the plunge, or maybe they won't take the plunge at all. But for the ones who are ready to take that plunge, I want them to know that they are in good company, and that I'm keeping an eye on them to help make sure that things go smoothly. It's not always super easy, right? There's a lot of people to keep track of, and a lot of people have questions, so I have to answer a lot of questions. But in general, I find it very fulfilling, and I think if you do it correctly, then you have family members and friends and acquaintances who are all starting to make quite a bit more money, and that just means more money into your social group. So if the pie's going to grow, then try to make sure that you have your piece cut out, and maybe your friends have a little bit of that piece as well. So,
and try to keep it lighthearted, right? Just you can talk about Satoshi and who he is, or if they found him, or
there's so much there's so much drama within the world of cryptocurrency that if anyone if I talk with friends or family and they want to talk about something, I can always find some sort of dramatic, story of intrigue. There's so much of that. There's no shortage. That's one reason. That's one reason I have the podcast, is to share some of those stories, because around every corner there's either a scam or some sort of dramatic end to either a company or to a person. Sometimes they involve drugs. Sometimes they involve court cases and stuff. So there's definitely no shortage of fun stories within the world of cryptocurrency.
Yeah, there's an endless source of entertainment. There's even whole movies if you run out of ideas.
And there are even movies that still have yet to be made whose stories are currently in progress, right? So one thing I'm happy to say that in my family, I must have been doing something right, because I do have multiple family members who are invested either heavily or lightly, or are interested in being invested. So it's kind of reassuring to me, because it also lets me know that to a certain extent, maybe I am a good representative of the cryptocurrency community, which at the end of the day, we all want to make lots of money, but if I'm not at least representing the community well, then I'm doing something wrong. Okay, so I think that's enough about Thanksgiving. For those of you out there, if you're listening to this and it's Thanksgiving, then I hope you're enjoying your meal. And if it's the day after Thanksgiving, then I hope you're on the treadmill. So now that I've created the podcast, the Captain Crypto Show, and I've been working in the cryptocurrency space for, the better part of a year now, and I've been invested in cryptocurrency for, I think the first one I bought was June 2012, so it's been more than 5 years. I haven't, I was usually not holding onto that cryptocurrency, unfortunately, but I've become knowledgeable enough that I feel confident about my ability to make decisions when it comes to using cryptocurrency as an actual investment. So I'm kind of curious, Jacob, if you don't mind me prying into your brain a little bit, because you've been around for quite a while and you have a very advanced knowledge, I guess, of cryptocurrency. So if you're willing to go into it, and full disclosure, or a little bit of a disclaimer here, this is not actual financial advice from financial advisors.
Right.
You get it. You get the spiel. But so I'm curious for your strategy, if you don't mind us delving into maybe what is your strategy, if you don't mind sharing it with us.
In a word,
it's Thanksgiving, bro. So
right.
You know what I mean? You got to share.
Of course. I got a lot to be grateful for anyways. So investment-wise, with Bitcoin, the common strategy that is repeated from the traditional investment in stocks and stuff is, and commonly referred to as HODL. That isn't actually a bad investment for Bitcoin.
Said it is not a bad investment.
No, it seems, and it's worked pretty darn well. I actually saw a statistic that Bitcoin is up for the last 5, 3, 1 years, a month, day, week, and hour. Yeah. So if you've been
all statistics.
So if you've ever held Bitcoin in the last 5 years for any range of period of time, you're up. So I mean that's a cherry picking data, but just generally that's a really recommended thing when you're buying like individual stocks or just index funds and things like that to hold your investment for extended periods of time, at least, because that just increases the likelihood that you are going to go away with a gain as time increases. And the thing about that is it's true for Bitcoin because Bitcoin is what is sort of in the same way like with traditional investments they recommend that for the S&P 500 or large cap stocks or for the top stocks,
the blue chips.
And the reason for that is because they're going to be around a lot longer. They're going to be here. They're at least the majority of them. The likelihood that they're going to be around in 10, 20, 30 years is pretty high.
Right.
Just because they have this sort of power, and that keeps them in there. Not all of them.
It's kind of like stability, right?
Right. So, and once you get that big, it's sort of hard. It's like rich. It's to get poor once you're rich, you have to be pretty stupid, and to get rich from being poor, you have to be pretty smart. So right. It's the same sort of idea. And so Bitcoin is that rich boy. Right? It's that rich stock that has that stability and probably will be around. And you might be able to say that with Ethereum or maybe Litecoin or another top stock, but for the vast majority of Litecoins, you have to watch. You have to watch on a week, on a day, on a month basis. It can disappear. Like it's a much volatile thing, and so and not only that, just from an emotional thing, you can really bite yourself in the butt if you don't have a good control or a good strategy that you really just stick to, like written down on paper that you stick to. So it can be dangerous if you're not doing things outside of the main things. Unfortunately, I know it's really these other altcoins are really exciting in what they're doing, but from an investment point, you really need a good. It's a much. I'm going to say a much more difficult, and I know people are going to be a little skeptical of that because I know people have bought altcoins and they've gone up and they're like, well, I'm a genius.
Right,
and I think Jamie Dimon sort of made fun of us, the whole crypto community in that sense. I think he made fun of his daughter saying, oh, I bought $300 of Bitcoin and or I bought some Bitcoin and it went up in price and now I'm a genius. And that is sort of true of altcoins.
Yeah, I would say in general, about a year ago or so, when Bitcoin was having kind of its, I don't know if you call it growing pains, but its scaling issues, I kind of figured, okay, well, Bitcoin's already big and it'll probably continue to grow, but I see the growth just stagnating. And a few months later, a bunch of the altcoins started growing really quickly, and the market share of Bitcoin started dropping really, really rapidly. So to me, I was thinking, okay, well, maybe Bitcoin has stagnated. But if you look today versus about a year ago, it's gone up essentially something like 900, 1,000%. So it's interesting, for this year, you had both the stability while still getting returns that are just phenomenal.
Right. You get higher percentage returns on altcoins when they go up, just because they're smaller.
When they go up.
Right, when they go up and when they go down. You get more volatility because they're a smaller market cap. The important thing to remember is Bitcoin dominance, and I like to see that on crypto market cap a lot. That's an important statistic, and we did see that drop. It has recovered a bit. I think we're at like 50 or 60% again. And I remember for the longest period of time, it was at 80%. And so I think we have seen, especially with Ethereum, really a lot of it's Ethereum.
Right.
And not just Ethereum, but a lot of things, so like Salt. That's a Ethereum.
ICO,
It's Ethereum based.
Right.
So it's really just all Ethereum that has taken away from Bitcoin at this point in terms of market cap or price or movement. And that's partly because Ethereum has done a great marketing thing. What I'm interested in is about so the marketing is definitely really important, but I'm interested in about the long-term implications on a tech base, because that's ultimately what's going to win the day. If you just have a technologically superior coin, I think over time, regardless of marketing, you'll just attract the smart people, and then there'll be results that show that, and you'll flood the market over time.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts? I guess we have to keep it brief, but scaling going forward. Now you have Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. Do you have kind of a preference between those two right now, or?
I know Bitcoin Cash's transaction fees are much lower, and also just because they don't have a lot of transactions.
Right. It's easy to brag about something where people aren't using it, right?
Yeah. I like to think of Bitcoin Cash as sort of a Litecoin sort of a version.
It has some similarities, it seems like.
Yeah, Litecoin is at least a code fork, not a hard fork of a blockchain level thing, but it is a fork of Bitcoin. So in terms of a technological basis, I prefer Litecoin over. If you're gonna use if you're gonna sacrifice, I guess you're the first comer of Bitcoin, and I guess just the immense amount of security that Bitcoin has because of the high amount of hashing power, and I think just more tested and more widely supported thing, because Bitcoin Cash isn't as widely supported. You lose the support.
Yeah, hardly anyone's using it. So that's why when I look at the price,
you can't spend it. You can't spend it and things like that. And just wallet support and things like that. You have almost more of that with Litecoin. You almost do.
That's what I'm kind of curious why. What do you think why Litecoin isn't seeing maybe the jump in price that Bitcoin Cash is seeing? Litecoin's, it's almost becoming this recurring joke that it's like the stable coin of altcoins.
Yeah, I don't think that Bitcoin Cash is actually doing as well as the numbers would show. I think even in Bitcoin in general, but especially in Bitcoin Cash, a lot of the market cap is just hot air. Right. It really just is. A lot of the people just haven't taken a side. They just I think there probably is some market manipulation. It sort of seems like there is.
Yeah, I've heard there's some wonky stuff going on with the mining as well.
Yeah, and so that might be artificially inflating it. I don't know what their long-term goal is. I don't really think they're really hoping to replace Bitcoin in terms of a marketing thing. Yeah,
and if they, I guess we're getting off into the weeds too much. So is it safe to say that your holdings are mostly or completely just Bitcoin right now, or?
Well, Bitcoin and I guess it's hard fork derivatives.
Right.
I will go every single week. I'll buy a few altcoins and just do a quick move on them or leverage in one way or another. And occasionally I'll hold some for like a month or two. I have held some previously for longer periods of time, but again, it's something. Whenever I do an altcoin movement, I'm always watching it. I'm watching it with like. I'm not sleeping.
Yeah, and I got to say, when it comes to Bitcoin, I realize that it's kind of like the first point of entry for a lot of people. So when someone's asking me about, oh, how do I get into Bitcoin and cryptocurrency? Like I still do tell them to start off with some Bitcoin, but like I'm concerned because it's had this price hike and it's almost unusable. It's like, hey, yeah, now send me $10. And you're gonna pay like a $4 fee.
Yeah.
So some of the usability I'm a little bit worried about. So I'm starting to lean more toward, okay, get some Bitcoin, but while you're there, get maybe some Ethereum or something else. Now, when it comes to my strategy, obviously strategies are always changing, but I think I've been talking to my friends a lot and they're getting so annoyed with it. But like about a little bit less than a month ago, I kind of put my neck out a little bit for my family and friends. I said, okay, I'm not here to tell you what to do with your money, but I think the next 2 or 3 months are going to be really good for Monero. And my holdings, without going into actual numbers, it was already lopsided toward Monero, where it's more than the majority is in Monero. And that was back a month ago, and it's doubled since then. So now I'm finding it's even more lopsided.
Right.
And it's interesting because when I didn't have as much Monero, I was like, oh yeah, if you really like a currency, just go full hog into it. Now I'm I'm doing just that. I'm watching it become more and more lopsided. I'm like, geez, like maybe I should get into some of the altcoins, So it's one of these things where you can have weak hands when it comes to price drops, but price hikes can also kind of mess with your head a little bit. So that is something I'm not going to tell listeners out there that they should buy Monero. Like, it's their money. They should decide what to do with it. But I think Monero has completely cornered the privacy market.
Do you think Monero is going to continue, at least in the short term?
Yeah, I would say the next 2 to 3 months still are very, very good for Monero.
What do you think about potentially selling a little bit? So if you really think it is going to go up, what you could do is you could sell a little bit of Monero, put it back to like Bitcoin or another more stable asset, and then you could leverage your remaining position to go up. So you would still have the same amount of exposure if it went up. And so you'd get a hit harder if you went down. But if you're confident that it's going to go up, you could increase your exposure, pay a tiny bit of interest to whoever's doing the margin, and then also have the stability of taking home some of your profits.
Right. So you're talking about using an exchange for one of the tools on exchange. I
hate recommending exchanges. I think I don't know if there's no real decentralized options for doing that. It depends on how big it is. I mean, you can do it with a portion or a small amount that you're comfortable with. I don't know. I like the idea of leveraging when
you're confident.
When you feel confident and you want to at the same time reduce your actual position for actual dollars amounts, but not your potential gain or loss.
Yeah, I'll have to talk to you more about that because that's what I'm thinking. I was like, you know what? Like, I'd love to squeeze more money out of these altcoins, but they're already such a small amount, small percentage now of my holdings. It's like, is there even that much to squeeze? But so for any of you out there who are into privacy or just in general, just take a look into XMR, the Monero cryptocurrency. I think the next few months are going to be very big for it. It's already doubled in the last month or so. And they have Trezor support coming. Probably that's a little bit longer off, but I know Nano Ledger support is coming within probably the next 2 months, I guess would be my estimate. I know there are mobile wallets coming out for it, and also they are working on something called Kovri, which helps you hide your IP address for transactions as well. And they're also working on a global payment processor that's called Globy. There's actually a pretty prominent coder within the Monero community who's the CEO there. So there's a lot of potential coming down the pipeline with Monero, and as it does better and gets more support for wallets and stuff like that, you're going to find the exchanges are going to start to add it even more. I know it's already on some exchanges, but I see it. I really am very bullish about it for the coming months. So I guess maybe we'll have to come back all the way around in a few months and see whether I was right. I usually don't give out predictions or anything like that, but on this one I feel pretty confident going forward. But this is cryptocurrency, so maybe I'll end up eating my foot. Yeah. All right, so in general, this week was pretty relaxed, and as you can see, it's just 2 of us in here in the studio tonight. A lot of our hosts are out traveling and visiting family, stuff like that. So within cryptocurrency, maybe having a little bit of a peaceful time is a good thing. So for those of you out there with your family with your friends, spending time with your loved ones. Remember, when it comes to cryptocurrency, set sail.